We're talking about nursing, healthcare, leadership, recovery, and senior living. The show brings the best in the industry to you because it's about you. I'm Angie Graham, and we're talking about it. Today, we are talking about end of life. I'm Angie Graham, and we are talking about it today. And with me from Comforting Closure, podcaster, and doula is Traci Arieli. Welcome, Traci.
I thank you so much for having me on.
I appreciate you being here. What is an end-of-life doula?
An end-of-life doula is a person who works with a person who is either getting up in age or who wants to talk about and plan for their end of life. And this person, as I said, could be a person who's older or even a person who is younger, 40s or 50s, maybe has children. But these are people who want to start thinking about the quality of their life at the end, make some decisions. End of life doulas. Some people call us death doulas. I prefer end of life doula because I'm working with people at the end of their lives, and I feel that death is just one part of their life. It's one moment in time, where the end of life is all about that length of time, that end part of their life and the quality of that life. But I work with people who, not only for planning, but also when they are ill, when they are dying, I work with them and their families. I might sit vigil. I might help the family and do a little respite care or companion. We also do things like legacy projects, and which is projects. It might be taking and writing down their life story, writing letters, creating videos for their family. And lastly, I do a lot of grief work.
Okay. When is it, do you find, or is there an age that's more common when people start thinking about their immortality?
Yes. I see people who are in their 50s where they have parents who are starting to get older and who are getting sick and dying. A lot of people who are in their 50s contact me not only to do some grief work. I'd say that the majority of my practice is that grief work, but I do see people who are older also who are looking at the end of their life and needing to start planning for it. So it's really 50 plus. I do get some people who are in their 40s contacting me also.
I can see that because I will tell you that since I personally turned 50, I think more about the last chapter than I ever have before in my life for whatever reason. I'm not sure. And I work in this business, so I'm not sure what, I don't know. Is that like that, what do they call it? That stage of life where you're in that crisis stage? I'm not sure, but I can definitely relate to that 50s being a time for that. I was listening to you on one of your podcasts talk about forever letters. What is a forever letter?
A forever letter is a letter that, in that case, and the guest actually was talking about what she does with people. And forever love letter is a letter that you write someone that you love and you want to give them maybe some advice or tell them what they mean to you. And usually this forever letter is presented to the person at a stage of their life. Maybe they're getting married or after the writer has passed on. And this woman was telling me a story about one of her clients where they wrote letters to their children because they were sick. They were terminally ill. And so this woman wrote letters to her son and daughter for significant moments in their life, knowing that that she wouldn't be there. So it's a letter. That's an example of a legacy project where you want to leave a part of yourself.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
That is really beautiful. I've seen that also. There's also books out there I think people can do, right? Kind of the same thing. You can tell your story or your legacy.
I personally love doing it on video just because I'm impartial to video, because then you can really see the person and hear them. I know for me personally, when I got married, we did a lot of course, we did a videographer, and we did like a When Harry Met Sally. As Oren and I talked about our love story. My parents did, and his parents did. And then my grandmother was our only remaining grandparent between Oren and I. And she sat down and she talked about how she met my grandfather. And it's a story that we never heard before. And this is the only video we have of my grandmother. And when she passed away, everyone wanted it. And so it is a piece of her to hear her voice. Her story is so profound and so impactful. And my nieces and nephew they met my grandmother when they were very young, but this is the only part of her that they have.
So when someone reaches out to you, I have so many questions, so bear with me. And they're like popping up all over the place as we're having this conversation. So when someone reaches out to you, what are the goals that they're hoping for in their planning? Is it that they have that bucket list of all the things they want to fit in? Is it that they're thinking about how they want to leave their legacy or what they want to be remembered for? What are some of because I'm thinking like if I reached out to you, what would be the goal in it? What would you help me to determine?
So that's a really interesting question. Now I'd like to start off and say, you asked me before, what do end-of-life doulas do? Every single end-of-life doula is a little bit different. We get trained, and we get trained at a really high level of the whole end-of-life journey, that life cycle of planning for it. You're going to get sick, or maybe you won't. The companioning, vigiling, grief work, all of us at this really high level. That's the training that we received. And then you've doulas that are very passionate about things. I love grief work. I absolutely love that. And so I've received a bunch of additional training on that. And I've also received additional training on the preparatory, the advanced planning, the advanced directive work also. So you need, when you're looking for a doula, it's important not only to click with them, to have that conversation and make sure that you click, but also make sure that they have that desire to help you with what you need. I know some people that won't do vigiling, as an example. I do everything but my specialties. I really like doing the advanced preparation and the grief work. When I work with a client, I always meet with them before and figure out what they need. Every single person is different. As an example, I'm working with someone right now who has stage 4 cancer, and but he's not in hospice. He's not anywhere that he is going to pass away or die anytime soon. But we are doing things like his advanced directive work, and talking I'm not only walking him through what some of those things really mean, CPR and some of the other life sustaining measures, but we're making sure that he has the correct proxies, healthcare proxies, and having that conversation, then having a conversation with his family about his wants and his needs. So it's a bunch of conversations. The majority of that is the conversations that need to happen. So a lot of conversations, a lot of setting expectations, a lot of figuring out what the person's environment, what they want that to be like at the end of their lives, where they want to spend the rest of their lives. When I talk with people, when I have those conversations, it's all centered around quality of life and what they want that end of life to look like. Another example of people I've worked with just recently, I had a person I worked with at the beginning of the year where I was brought in to see if they were ready to go into hospice. This person had been on dialysis for over 6 years, and his quality of life wasn't what he wanted it to be. So it was having that conversation of, when is that time? Where's that line where you're saying, okay, I'm ready to go into hospice. So I have those conversations. It's really dependent on what people need. I've done just legacy work with people before. I have done a lot of people that I work with are just the grief or at the grief stage. They've lost a spouse. And so coming in and helping them with that.
Such a gift to give a family their advance directives. I don't think that people understand what a gift that is, to know, for adult children, to know exactly what your parents wanted and you just execute their wishes. It makes things so much easier on the family. When my stepdad just recently passed away, he had all of his funeral plans were done. And it was such a gift because we didn't have to decide what he had picked it out down to the spray of flowers that he wanted for the casket. Like, it just was such a gift because there was no, well, I think he would like this, or would he like this? Like, we just knew this is what he wanted. And it was such a gift because the funeral director had all of this stuff. And it was amazing that we just said, okay, the time has come. And he said, great, we'll get everything done. And we didn't have to second guess anything. He had it down to the exactly what he wanted to happen. And they made all the arrangements. And for us family members, we just had to show up. So it was such a gift. That was my personal experience. And even when, you have loved ones that move into assisted living, and when they'll say, mom and dad, this is what they wanted, and they had it all figured out. It's such a gift to the family. Something we don't think about often enough.
I love that you call it a gift. I've always said that advanced planning is one of the greatest gifts you could give your family, so that after you pass away, they are focusing on being a family and in grieving versus running to the bank or trying to figure out your utilities. I'll give you an example of my own. Both my parents are still alive and are still well. I've told this story before on my podcast, but I think it's a great one to continue to keep on telling. My father and my mother are wonderful at preparation. And I remember them having the conversation with us. I went back home. I'm from Chicago originally, live out in California now, but I went home and they took me and my 2 older brothers and reviewed their will with us. And so it was all, the things, who's getting what, who gets the quilt, the needle point, and who gets the dishes and all of that kind of stuff. And then at the end of that, my oldest brother, he asked, what do you want? Do you have some of your health directives in here? What do you want? Do you want CPR? Or do you want, my dad's, I want CPR. I want, and so we were talking about it, but they were really uncomfortable, especially my father, with talking about those end of life steps. So they didn't document it. They didn't have an advance directive. I found that through this conversation, my oldest brother and I had very different ideas about what was okay at the end of life. And I told my parents, listen, the things are fine. It's not going to break us apart, my brothers and I apart when you guys pass away. But I'll tell you what will, tear us apart. If I see you in a feeding tube, or I see you, if I see you with a feeding tube, or I see you really uncomfortable. And since Mark is the oldest sibling, he is the proxy, the healthcare proxy. And I said, but unless you tell us what you want, and I see you're really uncomfortable, my brother and I are disagreeing, that's what's really going to tear us apart. And so fast forward a few months after that, I'm visiting my parents in Florida. They go down there during winter. And my father, we're out with him. He has a stroke. And we run to the hospital, and my father's fully cognizant, luckily, and the doctor walks in and says, Mr. Stull, I need to know, do you want CPR? My dad's like, yeah, I want CPR. You keep waking me. And I said, Dad, but wait a minute, you're claustrophobic. And you've told me you do not want to be hooked up to a ventilator. And my father said, no, definitely not. There's no way I want to be on a ventilator. And I turned to the doctor and I said, Doctor, what is the likelihood that my father, who's in his 80s, will have, you'll break his sternum or his ribs when you do CPR, and he'll have to be put on a ventilator? And the doctor said, yes, that will happen. And then I did a follow-up question. I said, Doctor, and what's the likelihood that even after he receives CPR, that he will be able to walk out of here okay? And the doctor turned, looked down. And I felt really sorry for the doctor. He was this young guy. And he said, not very good. And I said, yeah, in fact, statistically, a person who's in their 80s, they only have about a 7 to 17% chance of survival after receiving CPR in the hospital. And that's not even talking about outside of the hospital who receive CPR. And then my father, he is so cute. He said, Traci, I'm only 80 and I work out. So it was really, but these conversations that you have to have, most people don't really understand, even if they advance directive and they, check off everything there, they don't understand what it really means for them. And it's our bad as a society not talking about these things, not talking about the reality, because what you see on TV is not the reality, as working, doing what you do. As a community, as a society, we need to be doing a better job at talking about the realities.
Right. And, because they don't understand these things, for example, like hospice services, people just assume you have to be on your deathbed to have hospice services. And that's not the case at all. You can sign up, you have to have a qualifying diagnosis, but I've seen people on hospice for a year or more on hospice. They got a diagnosis and they get all the benefits of those supportive services throughout the decline while they're going through that. And I've seen far too many families wait too long where they could have had the benefit of having these services for their loved one, but instead they wait until they're bedbound, for example, and before they'll utilize hospice services. And they can provide so many services just based off a diagnosis. But people are just even afraid of the word hospice because they think it's like Dr. Kevorkian is going to be coming in, and they think of it as, oh, they're going to push this process along. And that's not how it works at all. And you're probably very familiar with that too. But I find people are very afraid of hospice because they don't completely understand what hospice is.
Yeah. And it's really important to have this, when you have a conversation about what hospice is, that conversation is really about quality of life. What is quality of life that you want? Would you be, would you be comfortable being bedbound and that's it? And you can't move around and you're, You might have a feeding tube. And like, what is that point? Like, I know for me personally, my husband and I, we love to hike. We're really, we like to be physically active. We like good food. I know to my husband, the thought, he said the thought of having to be in a feeding tube and being in bed, no, that's not for me. For me too, I love food. So, the thought of being bedbound and being hooked up to machines and not being able to breathe well. And, there's a point where the quality of life, that's not what I want. So I would go into hospice, and you could go into hospice if you have a terminal diagnosis where doctors think that you're going to pass away within 6 months. And there are reviews. You do have to, doctor does have to, I think the first time is 3 months into it. But you could remain there. It doesn't mean you're actually going to die within 6 months. Saw Jimmy Carter over a year, right? A year and a half almost, I think. So, and it's at that point, you choose, hospice is a service. It's not a place. So you choose where you want the hospice to be. It's a team of people. And most people want to die at home. I'd say about 70 or 80% of people they did the last survey. And so it's just a service, and you could have it anywhere. Right. And it's really important. It's really important to take advantage of it. They take care of your pain. They make sure that your comfort care is what it is. And it's also important to understand that hospice is paid for by Medicare. And that hospice, what it is that team of people, and that's what's taken care of, and the medication and the, if you have an oxygen machine and the bed. So that's taken care of by Medicare. But what's not taken care of by Medicare is the place. So they're not going to pay your rent, as an example. So if you are in a assisted living facility, you still need to pay for that facility, or if you're at home, you'll have to pay for whatever's there, and they're not going to pay for food and that stuff. It's specifically the group of people, that team, and the medications and everything around that.
Yeah, they can send in a CNA to assist with showers. Yes. They can have the clergy come, music therapy. I mean, there's just when my stepdad was on it, like he loved all the visits. He had some memory issues, but he didn't always know what the visit was about. But he loved all the company. He loved the people coming, so he looked forward to that.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about guiding children through the grief of losing their parent?
Yeah, I'm not a specialist with children, and I would say that children, how they process grief is really natural, is really honest. And what is important, I would say, with children, children look at the people around them to see how they need or how they should act. And so I had parents who've lost spouses, or, a person who's lost a spouse and has children. And they do ask me there, how can I make sure my child is okay? And the advice I really give them is to be open with their own grief so that their children could see it and know that it's okay to grieve. I've had people tell me that when they've tried to protect their children from the grief, that it confuses them. Someone's son came up to her and said, I'm really confused because I feel sad and no one else feels sad, but I feel sad. Is there something wrong with me?
Powerful.
And she had the conversation with him about her feelings. So I think that because we're in such a grief adverse society that we do try to protect our children, but our children, this is very natural to them. And what they'll usually do is they'll process it, they'll feel what they need to feel, and then they will self-regulate. So they'll go out and they'll start playing. I mean, it'll be very sudden. They're grieving and they're okay, let's go play. Or, let's go read a book, or, okay, they self-regulate very naturally. And yes, sometimes you do have acting out, which is natural. Sometimes you have kids that regress back to an earlier stage. They might want more time and attention. They might become a little more clingy. They might need that extra time. But I think the most important thing is to be really honest with your grief and to allow them to see you grieve. If you have a child, as an example, who maybe your parent, their grandparent, or your spouse has passed away, to be very honest with them.
Yeah, and as a parent, I'm sure it's got to be difficult to try to figure out how to navigate that. Because for you as a surviving parent with your children, you want them to have confidence that you've got this, and they're going to be okay. So, but at the same time, it's a painful thing around that's affecting the entire family.
Yeah. And
so
I would say too, if you see that your child is having, because grief is very natural, and I don't believe that we need to label grief as a mental disorder, but people do get depressed during grief. Natural. But when you see a child needs extra help, going to a counselor who is a play therapist or an art therapist, doing something that's really creative like that is very helpful.
And everyone grieves differently too. Some people grieve more internally, so they may be absent of emotion that is visible. Is that accurate to say? Where some people can be more visual with their grief? I mean, I think everyone has a different processing. What about length of time? Is there that famous saying of, well, time heals all things. Well, what does that mean? I hear people say, here it is. Why am I still crying? Dad's been gone X amount of years, or this happened X amount of years ago. Well, is there a time, or is it each individual's time?
I would say that, as I said before, we don't do grief well in our society. We don't do death well because we don't see it. And there is this notion that people, they grieve for 6 months, they grieve for a year, and then that's it. They should get over it. You will never be done grieving. When you grieve, it becomes part of who you are. So you are never done with grieving. And what is important to note is that's okay. I always have people asking, every single person that I work with who is grieving, every single one of them has said, what's wrong with me? Am I doing this right? Every single person. And 80% of what I do is grief work. Yes, you're doing it right. There is no right or wrong. And there are no stages that you're not going to go through linear stages of grieving. It is like a bowl of spaghetti. You are going to feel sadness. You're going to feel anger, and then you'll go away from that and you'll feel okay. And then you'll come back to those things. You're going to feel guilt. Every single caretaker that I know feels guilt because they feel relief after the person passes away. So there is no time limit. My cousin died 25 years ago. She would have turned 50 in April. I still think about her almost every single day. There is no end to grief. It changes. That relationship with that person changes also. I still have a relationship to Heather, my cousin, even though she's gone. But that grief, it changes, but it is always there, and there is no time limit, and it is okay. Just be patient with yourself and do what you need.
Okay. I know as a family, my dad, it's been about, it was 2001, so we're closing in on almost 25 years. But when all of us kids get together, and I'm the youngest of 7, so there's a bunch of us, we always, sooner or later, we end up talking about dad in some way, about growing up, the crazy stuff he did, and we will laugh about it, but I think we just honor his memory, and it's still a way that when we all get together and he's still not there, and I think about that too, when he first passed away. For the first several years, I was kind of fixated on what he was missing. Like, my mind would think, man, I really wish he was here for this, or I really wish he was, here for that, and then that changed over time. Of talking about him was just a way to remember and think about the good times. And now I think about so much has happened in life, and I no longer focus on what he missed, or he wasn't here for this event or a wedding or so it does change over time.
Yeah,
for sure.
It does change. And I want people to know that it's not just a year. I think people feel so awful after that first year. And when they start feeling really bad at year 2, I have so many clients who are rounding that first year corner or are in the second year, and who ask me, what's wrong with me? It's been over a year. I'm in my second year, and that second year is often harder than the first because people do expect you, unfortunately, to be over it. But no, that's our society. I mean, our society, corporate America, you only have 3 days off of work for bereavement. In our 3 days. Really? Your spouse dies and you have 3 days off? I mean, most companies are much better but at providing more time off, but legally 3 days.
Yeah, it's crazy. One of your most recent podcast episode was titled Death with Dignity in Switzerland. Tell us a little bit about that.
That was the only episode, I think, where we almost had to stop. It was so emotional. I'm a really big advocate of death with dignity, medical aid in dying in Canada. It's medical assistance in dying. In Switzerland, it's assisted suicide, called, even though I hate that term, assisted suicide. I'm a really big advocate of it. I think that people, it's just a question of autonomy. And when we want our lives to end because of quality of life. And in the United States, there are 10 states in the District of Columbia where it's legal to receive medical aid in dying. And there are rules. You have to be at the 6-month mark, or the doctors have to believe that you have less than 6 months to live. And you have to be fully cognizant. You need to be able to speak for yourself. And you need to be able to self-administer and of the medication that will end your life. This one person, this one man, he had dementia. When you have dementia, medical aid, MAID, it's MAID for short, MAID is not an option, because when you get to that 6-month mark of you're going to die within six months, you're no longer able to speak for yourself and to make those decisions, usually. And so then you don't qualify. In that one episode, Erica's husband, John, he had Alzheimer's. And he knew from the beginning that he wanted to do medical aid in dying. He knew that he knew at a certain point that he wouldn't want to live. In the United States, as I said, when you have dementia, by the time you're bad enough, you don't have the faculties to make those decisions. So they decided to go to Switzerland. And in Switzerland, all you need are there's a list of things, but one of them is that you don't need that 6-month diagnosis. So you don't have to be terminally ill, or you don't need to have that that doctors notice that they believe you're going to die within 6 months. So they went there, and they performed medical assistance in dying, or assisted suicide, as it's called in Switzerland, there. And so in that episode, she went through in very minute detail the experience, and it was it's an amazing story. But it is also it was a very difficult story to listen to and to talk about.
Sure. What end of life story or lesson has impacted you the most?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I didn't know a lot about dying before I became an end of life doula. I mean, I knew just because of reading books and talking to people, but I think that the expectation was a lot different than what it really was. And so my expectations, and who I am, has completely changed from who I was before. I was an end of life doula. As an example, I was in tech beforehand, which is very different than what I do now. And someone asked me, could I ever go back to tech? Could I ever go back doing what I did before? And I said, I don't think so, because I don't think that I could have, excuse my language, those bullshit conversations anymore that I had to have, that facade, that mask that I had to wear before, that all of us have to wear in corporate America, quite honestly. I'm much more real and authentic. And it wasn't one specific point or one specific person.
Mm-hmm.
It is the everyday having the honor of working with people, of having real discussions, of seeing people grapple with what they need to grapple with at the end of their lives, and learning from that. Every single person that I meet with, I learn from. And as a result, the way I live changes.
Well, you're making an impact, you're changing people's lives. So there's a big reward with that. And it's important work. And it's a task that is important, but people don't want to talk about it at the same time. So I'm sure it's very rewarding in many ways. When it comes to your own mortality, what do you think about the most?
I think about how I the quality of my life at the end of my life and what I want that to look like. And quite honestly, I think of Oren, my husband, and how little time we actually have here, and what I want the rest of our relationship, of our life, to be like. Life goes really fast.
It sure does.
And so it's really, what do I want us to be like? And how do I want us to be? And those decisions, some of them are really big decisions. As I said, I made a major career change coming into this. And I could go back. Yeah, I've had people call me and want me to return. But the type of life I want is not that anymore. And just everything, what was important before is not. Tech is very money oriented. That's not, yes, having enough to eat, having pain.
Of course.
Important stuff. I'm not saying I'm not, but things become so not important. Like things and experiences become a lot more important, and the type of life that I want to live and create has just really changed.
Right. It would be so much simpler, wouldn't it, if you just knew you had until 80 or you had until 75, because then you could plan it out. Like, at least that's the way I think of it. Man, if I knew that I had until 70, would I still be working today? Probably not. I'd probably rearrange my life and try to retire the best that I could. You know what I mean? But we never know. And you're so conflicted because you hear about, retirement and you need this much and you got to have this. And you hear these stories of people that work and work and work, and then they finally retire and they maybe get 2 or 3 years. And I can never help but think to myself, I wonder if they would have known that 68 was the end game, how they would have lived that differently. Would they have lived it differently? Those are some of the questions I ask myself. And just recently, I had a classmate pass away. That was very impactful on me too. That because then you really start thinking about, all of your classmates around you, and you're like, wow, so young, so young. But we don't know. You don't know when that time is going to be.
And in a way, that's a gift. Like, I love being able to look at things through the lens of, this might be my last day. You don't know. And what a gift the day is. And so living every day like it is a gift. I also, there is your question before, has there been any one specific person or someone who has impacted the way I live? And I have worked with someone who celebrated the end of their life. Like, when I was working with them, the first thing they said was, I don't want this to be sad. I want to celebrate the end of my life. We had a celebration of life before this person passed on. And this person was
beautiful.
Just like, this person grasped life. This person was Buddhist. So they looked at this. This is just another stage of my life, and I want to experience it, even though it is a tough stage of life. I want to experience it full on. And that, to me, not only do I want to live life, but I want to live that part of my life and be fully aware and really just live it. That was very impactful for me to see.
That is a really beautiful story, honestly, to celebrate your life at the end of life. And I think we all should earn for that. yearn for that, and really beautiful. So when you said you do go in and you do sit with people through the grieving process, family members.
Yes. I'm sorry.
And, I'm just curious, because every family unit, depending on their culture, and I've been around this too, being in the assisted living world, because families will come in and together. And I've seen, the good and the bad of it, if I'm being honest. I've seen family members that hadn't been in the same room together in 25 years, and now they come together. And I've seen beautiful endings, and I've also seen the turmoil of what the life, and now they're coming together. What has been your experience with seeing this? What's more often than not?
I've been very fortunate. I have seen most of the time very good endings where families were, during the dying process, that families were very supportive of one another and very supportive of the person that was passing away, that was dying. There have been times where it hasn't been as nice as that. It is a very emotional time. I've been involved where family members, they hadn't spoken with each other, as you said, in years. And they were brought in, and there was some healing. And depending on where the person is during that transition, I've been present and worked with people who have said, I haven't talked to so-and-so in a number of years, and I want to talk to that person. I want to take and amend that relationship before I pass away. So I've been at points where I had to reach out to family members where they have been estranged for a number of years, and to work on that. When you know you're dying, or when a person knows they're dying, some of those ego-driven behaviors kind of the door. But most of the time, families, it's a high pressure situation, and having someone there, a third party that's there to not only educate, but is there to walk with the family, walk alongside them, is really helpful. And so that's what I do. I take and I support the family, educate them on what they might or might not see. It's a really scary time, because most family members, most people haven't seen people die, and they don't know.
Yeah.
And so again, it's not the easiest of things, but having someone, when I'm there and I'm helping families and I'm walking alongside them, I'm there to help calm things down and to help support them. And every family is different. Every family is different.
Yes, every family is different. And I will say the majority of the families I experienced too came together with grace and during those times. But and that's, I think, the majority. Such an important topic that we don't talk enough about. And I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your experience with us today. And the end of life, we said we would talk about it, and we did. Thank you, Traci. For more information, we can contact you. Where can we find you?
My website, www.comfortingclosure.com.
Okay.
Or you could email me directly at Traci, Traci, at comfortingclosure.com.
Well, I really appreciate the conversation and having you on the show, and some real insightful things came out of this, and that I know that the audience can gain from. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
We're Talking About It is brought to you by Our House Senior Living. Visit us at ourhouseseniorliving.com.